right, so now our final jam that we're going to look at is a jazz blues, and I've saved the most fun for the end, obviously. Now, a jazz blues form is similar to the standard 1-4-5, except it has a bunch of chords thrown in there to kind of lead you into the changes. So let's talk through the form, and I'll show you kind of how I might approach it. This is going to be in every guitar player's favorite key, the key of B flat. And the reason it's in B flat is because often you go to a jam, blues jam, and a sax player or a keyboard player gets up and says, let's do a jazz blues, and let's do it in B flat. And every guitar player, you see the color drain from their face as they fear the key of B flat. But there's nothing to fear, because we're going to talk about it. All right, so B flat, jazz blues. First chord, the one chord, is obviously B flat 7, because we're talking dominant chords here, right? So what are you going to play over a B flat 7? By now you should know this, really, right? You could play the major pentatonic. You could play Mixolydian. You could just play out of the chord tones of the arpeggio. B flat, D, F, A flat. You could bend between them. All right, so something like that to bring out B flat. If you want to just play two chord tones, let's play the third and the root. The third and the fifth. D and F, okay? Or maybe D, F, and A flat. That's a good one, all right? So, and then for the immediate next chord, we have the quick 4, which we've seen a lot through this course, right? The quick 4 is an E flat 9 or E flat 7. And so, again, there's not a lot of time on this chord, but you could think switching major pentatonic to minor. But really, what you want to do is bring out this change of this D going to this D flat. Remember this? That's the 1 to 4 change, right? So the D moves to D flat. So after you've done your opening lick, as soon as I hit that D flat, I've locked myself into that E flat chord. So B flat, E flat, all right? And think about the arpeggio. E flat, G, B flat, D flat. Any of those are good notes to hit on that, but particularly D flat, because you're moving from D to D flat. Back to B flat. Same devices. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more colorful. We have what's called a, it's like a mini 2-5-1 if you think of the 4 chord as 1 for a second, right? The secondary dominant thing again that I just mentioned in the last lesson. So we have an F minor 9, B flat 13 into E flat 9 or 13. So F minor to B flat. What we're gonna do about that? One thing you could do is completely ignore it, which, you know, if your head's hurting, is a great way to get through jazz blues. You're playing F, B flat. Now I'll just play on E flat. So that's actually completely valid. But let me point out what you could do, and that is try to bring out the changes. So that kind of thing. What am I doing there? Well, I'm basically thinking of this. I'm thinking of an F minor pentatonic, but putting the flat 5 in. And then I want to target the B flat 13, right? I'm going to target the 13th, which is G. So I'm just going to walk up to it. Right? And that is me landing on the E flat. So bam, 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 bam. So my target note is the third and the root of the E flat. Okay, so here's the F, here's the B flat. I'm actually playing the A flat over the B flat. A flat, B flat, A flat, walking up to the G. Right? And it's easier to hear than explain, really, because what you have to do with this kind of thing, if you're playing in this kind of jazzy style, disclaimer, I'm not a jazz guitar player, but if you're playing in this jazzy style, you have to fill in the gaps to make sure that the target note you want, you land right on the downbeat. Like if I did that, I'm getting to that chord too early. So I have to go because it's like ba ba da ba da ba ba, but there's the downbeat. You see what I mean? So that's kind of how I think of it. It's probably not the most technical method, but it's kind of like I know where I want my chord tones to end. So I'm going to fill in the space to get there. But I'm using F minor out of that pentatonic, and then I'm using chord tones from the B flat 13. And then there's my target note for the E flat. So far we have some kind of major pentatonic lick into the 4 chord with the flat 7, back to the 1, F, B flat. There's my, and I want to really emphasize that. There's my E flat 7. Now next we have an E diminished, which is basically E flat 7 with a flat 9. And we've seen this a lot in the course already, where you take a dominant chord, add the flat 9, and that gives it that diminished kind of tension. So for that, you could basically choose any of the notes from E diminished, E, G, B flat, or D flat, right? And any one of those notes are going to work over that diminished chord. So I might just pick a couple of them. Just that, and it still sounds bluesy, but that's actually part of. But you see, if I play the whole thing, it's very spelt out. E diminished arpeggio over an E diminished chord. It's probably better if I just go, because that sounds less like I'm really playing the diminished arpeggio as an exercise, more like I'm just kind of grabbing notes from it. So, B flat major into E flat 9. Back to B flat, F minor, B flat. There's my E flat 7. Now I need, so you hear that with an E bass. There's my diminished. Back to B flat. And then here in the jazz blues, we have a 6 chord that's dominant. G7. So the only thing I'm going to think about a G7 is that the third of the chord is a B, and my B flat mixolydian, B flat major pentatonic, B flat arpeggio doesn't have a B. So therefore, if I'm playing B flat, I'm just going to land that B right on the downbeat of the G7, and that's enough to lock me in. I'm not even going to worry about the other chord tones. Third of the chord, always a winner. Hit that B on the downbeat of the G7. So B flat major into minor or E flat 7, back to major, to the F minor to the B flat. There's my E flat. Here's my diminished. B flat. There's my G7. Now I need a C minor. Okay, so here in this position, I'm going to think kind of an arpeggio. Literally playing, you know, the notes from the chord. C, E flat, G, B flat. And the third of an F7, which is what it's doing a 2-5. C minor 7, F7, right? So C minor. There's my F7, okay? So far, B flat major, minor, major. G7, C minor. There's your F7. Now we have the turnaround, and the turnaround we're gonna use our fun tritone substitution idea. Remember that? B flat, D flat, B flat 13, D flat 13, C minor 7, B 13, back. Right. So for our B flat, chord tones alert, 3rd, 5th, 7. Now for our D flat, I'm just going to play off of this B here. I'm basically kind of thinking like, still thinking of it as a G7, but playing diminished off of the 3rd of the G7, right? So if I did that, I could play this. All right, so you could play a diminished arpeggio off the third, the fifth, the flat 7, or the flat 9 of any dominant chord, right? So if we think of that as going, even if the bass is doing the tritone turnaround, if we think about G7, the third is B, the fifth is D, the 7 is F, the flat 9 is A flat. There's our diminished sound, right? So I might do this. Instead of this, I might do this. Let's see. Hear that? It's really pretty, actually, isn't it? So what it's doing is I'm playing for the B flat 13, the third, the fifth, the 7. For the G7 or D flat, I'm playing the third, fifth, 7, again, chord tones. For the C minor, I'm just coming down a C minor chord. Right? Literally. And then for the last chord, for the F7 altered, or you could think of it as a B13, I'm playing from the third of the F, third, fifth, flat 7, flat 9. That's the only tension note there, but it's a good one. Remember how you could take an F7 and flatten the 9 or sharpen the 9? And it wants to resolve back into B flat, and you can hear it. So the goal is to be able to play through those changes without a jam track. And here, the changes going by. Now, I know this one, that's pretty dense, right? There's a lot going on there. So what you want to do, the way you want to practice it, just take a few chords at a time. You know, just take the... maybe just that much, the first line, you know, the B flat into the E flat, back to the B flat, and then the F minor, and then the B flat. And just work on that for a little bit. See if you can see those arpeggios, those chord tones. Again, go through it and think about where we're specifically hitting those chord tones, because most of it is stuff we've already done in the course. We're taking the one chord and we're seeing the quality of the chord, the 7 and the third, and dropping it to the third and the 7 of the 4 chord and back. And then how can we bring out F minor to B flat? Well, we want to look for those chord tones in there, right? We want that A flat in there. And then we want to target the G of the E flat chord, because that's the third and that locks us in. We play an E diminished arpeggio, or at least part of it, back to B flat, familiar territory, major pentatonic blues lick maybe. And then to grab that G7, we want to target the B. And then we have a C minor to an F, which is just kind of an arpeggio. And then we have the turnaround, the B flat, G7, C minor, F7, which we could treat as B flat, D flat, C minor, B. And there's a million ways to play around a jazz turnaround, but the way I'm choosing to do it is pretty much basic chord tones, taking the third, fifth, 7 of the B flat, taking the third, fifth, 7 of the G, taking the fifth, third root of the C, and then here's the only one with tension of the F7, third, fifth, 7, flat 9, and that's all the tension we need to bring us back into that B flat. And incidentally, that flat 9 resolves down a half step into the fifth of the 1 chord. Okay? So work on it slowly, and when you feel like you're up for the challenge, let's see if we can trade over it, sticking around the 6th position, B flat, jazz blues.